Hello and welcome. Today we're going to talk about gaming and how it's being used as a recruitment tool for terrorism. Every once in a while you just look at these stories and you have to sit there and question what the motive is behind them. Today we're talking about how the Department of Homeland Security of the United States is funneling money into research about recruitment in gaming for terroristic activities. I know this sounds a little far-fetched, but this isn't too far of what possibly could be happening in your kids' games. But I'm not here to scare anybody. This is just a simple thing of the industry is that big, it's going to weed itself in there. Just like we've seen with many other isms that we see in this gaming sphere. It's a billion-dollar industry. You're going to see negative people on each side of the coin continuing to push these ridiculous ideas. So this one is part of Vice, or their motherboard aspect of Vice. DHS to spend almost $700,000 investigating radicalization in gaming. You know what? Sure, I can see it, but at the same time, this also comes from the 20 years of the US Army using gaming as a recruitment tool. So you have both sides of the coin here, where the US Army is legitimately, they push out games to try and recruit people into the military. And now you have the other side of it saying, oh, now we got to look into it to see if there's actual radicalization happening in gaming. I'm sure at some point in someone's life, they've had conversations with people playing a video game where terrorism or radicalization like this has possibly happened. The odds of it not happening at this point, with a billion-dollar industry, a worldwide phenomenon of playing video games, it's so astronomically possible that sure, you throw money at it and take a look at it. Over the past decade, video games have increasingly become focal points of society activities and identity creation for adolescents and young adults. Relationships made and fostered within game ecosystems routinely cross over into the real world and are impactful parts of local communities. Very much so. Gaming is a huge aspect of everyone's life now. The industry is bigger than Hollywood now, and that's why you see some video games getting the real green light and push for accessibility, for diversity, for all of these ridiculous things that comes down to it. Honestly, when it comes to a video game, you make a good game, you make a good story, you keep the game updated, and you don't have a ton of bugs and lag and issues with the game, you're going to have a success in the video game market. The market is that sprawling and that big now. That's where it's going to be. But if you just look at the radicalization in video games, where is your downfall? How about you look at the kid luring stuff that's in video games? You look at the aspect of how video games actually reduce crime and violence in and around the industry and in and around society. You look at things throughout the whole as a whole, you're going to be able to find every niche and aspect of it in this billion-dollar industry. It's plain and simple. The money is going to a joint venture between Middlebury Institute Center on Terrorism, Extremism, and Counterterrorism. Let's take a look at this. Who is this? The Center of Terrorism, Extremism, and Counterterrorism conducts depth research on terrorism and other forms of extremism. We're probably going to see some article come out slamming video games and slamming gamers throughout the whole thing, saying that there are all these isms and they happen to be the ones that are fueling the culture war, the everything that we see here today. Now, going back to the whole, after 20 years, the U.S. Army is shutting down recruitment video. I mean, we know this has been a fact. We just saw Maverick hit the theaters and do huge numbers. And when Top Gun came out, originally they saw the same influx with the recruitment in the military and the same sort of idea where people were like, hey, this is really cool. It got people really wanting to fight in that sense. So that's where this kind of continues into that sense, and things are going to continue. In the early 2000s, video games were a political hot potato. Some elected officials were pointing as them as corruptive forces on youth of America and an industry that was in dire need of regulation. Then a few years later, the hot coffee mod for Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, in which led 2 characters in the game to have animated fun, found its way into the wild, and hell truly broke loose. Well, there are people out there that will mod anything in video games now. The cries for regulation eventually led to a Supreme Court case which confirmed the video game industry was covered by the First Amendment, just like books and movies, which there you have it. It is covered. Now, this all coming down to the point where PUBG is too violent and must be banned, says the Taliban.
You are banished!
And this just came out a couple days ago as well. So it's kind of, you're sitting there going, what? Hold on. Now you're investigating and doing reports and studies on radicalization video games, but the radicalization of those people are banning the video games. I just see all these stories that pop up at the exact same time and completely contradicting the way the idea of it is going across. It's, to me, I'm finding this funny. I hope you guys are finding this funny, because this is an absolutely ridiculous topic at this point. And we know that this is going to point to more stories down the line where journalists are going to pick this up and ride with it and probably say, hey, listen, your kid might be radicalized because they're playing PUBG, or they're playing what is it? Modern Warfare is the new one coming out right now. Or yeah, like, it's video games. We use them to de-stress. It lets us move along with life and actually not have the problems that we have with our lives in society means. It lets us escape and creates a fantasy world where we can actually unleash and get endorphins from playing these games. Does it lead to these things? It could easily, but I think if there is a cell like that, that's where the money should be. Maybe it should be going to law enforcement or something in order to look into these cells and actually catch these people doing that, instead of doing a broad stroke across the board saying all video games are going to be violent and all video games are going to lead to radicalization, because that's not the case. Especially when you can sit there and look at the psychology of modern media culture, violent video games and real-world violence, rhetoric versus the data. And this article here, or this paper, talks about how assaults and homicides actually go down with video game sales. I know they have a dip here, but it still is continuing to go down overall. So throughout the course of video games, we have seen these things go down on in societal means. And then out of the University of Saskatchewan, a positive side of violent video games play, the negative correlation between violent video game play and violent crime. So the exploration of the potential link between aggravated and violent video games have been extended to violent video games, such as precursor to violent game. If violent video games does increase aggression in players, that does not translate into real world violence or violent crime. There is no single criminological and genetic risk factor that causes someone to commit violent criminal acts. So the idea that violent video games causes players to commit a crime, though desensitized or otherwise, is not plausible. So I think in this whole situation, them throwing money to look into the radicalization of gamers in video games, I think they need to actually point this down a little bit, take it down a notch. Don't look at video games as a whole and try and weed out where people are being recruited. You saw this with chat rooms. You've seen this throughout the entire history of the internet in general, where people can communicate and then they get radicalized. And it's a situation where blaming video games will come out of it. I can tell you right now, some people are going to prop it up and say video games are the reason why your kids are becoming more violent. Anyway, guys, I just wanted to go over that. My little bit of a take on how video games are not really the end all be all, why we're seeing an increase in violence in certain areas of the world. It's not because of video games through and through. In most cases, people are picking up a video game to relax as a form of entertainment and not to be a recruitment tool for either A, the army, or B, the terrorists and the radicalization of society. It's such a ridiculous thing at this point. I find this very funny. It's going to probably create more memes out of it in the long run. And hopefully you guys found some entertainment out of this video. If you did, and you made it this far in the video, you got to do one thing for me, and that is hit the subscribe button. Or you can sit there and like and share the video. How ridiculous do you find this notion? Let me know down below, and I will see you all next time. This is Proud Canadian Phoenix Cindershadow signing off here. Have yourselves a great day.